I am Michael Anderson, just an ordinary man like anyone else, but today my life changed forever. That morning, when I woke up, the sound of the alarm blared loudly, yanking me from sleep. I turned it off, my eyes still heavy with sleep, as if I'd just survived a nightmare. But as I reached for my phone, I saw the screen flashing with a barrage of notifications. 10 missed calls, 15 ignored messages. These numbers didn't seem urgent at first, until I realized that most of them came from an unfamiliar number. I didn't know who was calling, but a strange and uncomfortable feeling began to creep in. As someone who works in tech, I've grown accustomed to spam calls from marketing companies, often ignoring them without a second thought. But there was something unsettling about the eerie silence of that morning. I scrolled through the messages I had skipped, but none of them eased the growing unease. One message stood out, a voicemail. "Hello, this is Dr. Unintelligible from Scripps Mercy Hospital in San Diego. We need to discuss the condition of your wife, Sarah. She is being treated in the emergency room." I froze. The words "your wife" and "emergency room" punched the air out of me. Sarah? Why was she in San Diego? She hadn't mentioned anything about this. I quickly replayed the voicemail, my heart racing. The doctor's voice continued, chilling me to the core. "Sarah has been in a serious accident. She has sustained severe burns and is in critical condition." Panic surged through me as I frantically checked the other missed calls. They were all from the hospital. I felt the room closing in, suffocating under a blanket of unease. I couldn't understand. Sarah had always told me she was in San Francisco for work. She'd never said anything about a trip to San Diego. Had I missed something? I had to find out. I rushed to her office. The small room, cluttered with papers and the hum of a still-running laptop, felt oppressive. The desk lamp was on, but she was nowhere in sight. Her laptop was still logged in, the screen locked. Sarah had always been meticulous about keeping her work secure. But today, my suspicions outweighed my sense of privacy. I dug through the desk drawer, my hands trembling as I rifled through papers. And there, buried beneath a pile of documents, was a scrap of paper with her password hastily written on it. I hesitated. This was the first time I had done something like this, breached her privacy. A surge of guilt washed over me, but my need for answers pushed me forward. I typed the password in, the screen flickering to life. What I saw next shattered everything I thought I knew. The browser tabs she'd left open were filled with work-related pages, but as I sifted through her emails, I stumbled upon something I hadn't expected. There, among routine business correspondence, were a series of emails between Sarah and a man named Jake Miller. My blood ran cold. Jake. He was Sarah's college friend, the one I had never trusted, the one she always insisted was just a friend. But now, seeing the affectionate messages exchanged between them, I couldn't ignore the obvious. This wasn't just a business trip gone wrong. This was something far more complicated. A hidden relationship Sarah had been keeping from me. The more I dug, the worse it got. I found Facebook messages, secret conversations between Sarah and Jake, coordinating times to meet, and making plans to see each other. What shook me even more was the involvement of Sarah's family. They knew. They had been helping her cover this up. A boiling rage rose in my chest. I could hardly breathe, let alone think clearly. I had to get to the bottom of this. But first, I needed confirmation about Sarah's condition. I dialed Scripps Mercy Hospital, and after some explanations, was finally connected to someone in the emergency room. When the nurse confirmed that Sarah had indeed suffered severe burns and was in critical condition, my stomach dropped. But no, this couldn't be happening. "My wife is in San Francisco," I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. "It can't be her." But even as I denied it, I knew deep down that the truth had already settled in. The lies, the secrecy, the betrayal. It was all starting to unravel. My heart shattered, but I knew I couldn't stop now. I had to keep searching for the truth, no matter what it cost. As I sat there, staring at the screen, everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, collapsed. The trust one had in Sarah, the belief I had in her, was gone. She had been living a double life, and the weight of it pressed down on me. How could I have missed this? How could I have been so blind? But that was only the beginning. The anger inside me grew with every passing second. I couldn't let her escape the consequences of her actions. I needed answers. I needed to know why she had done this to us. My fingers hovered over the keyboard again, as I began to call the hospital for one last confirmation. My voice was tight, hoarse, and full of a dread I couldn't contain. "This is Michael Anderson. Is my wife Sarah Anderson being treated at your hospital?" The nurse's voice on the other end was calm, but I could hear the strain in her tone. "Mr. Anderson, your wife is in critical condition. We need your cooperation." I wanted to scream at her, to demand the truth, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't deny it any longer. I dropped the phone, and everything I had known was broken beyond repair. I stood up, the coldness of the moment seeping into my bones. I couldn't wait any longer. If I didn't act now, I would be swallowed by this web of lies, trapped in it forever. My anger had already given way to a chilling resolve. I couldn't let Sarah continue living in her world, while I was left drowning in her deception. Those long, sleepless nights had turned into an endless spiral of nightmares. It was time to confront this head-on. Without hesitation, I decided to go to Jake's house. Not to fight him, but to face the truth. I didn't want to live in a lie any longer. If I had been wrong about anything, I had to clear it up now. The darkness surrounding this situation had consumed me, and only the truth could bring me the clarity I needed. As I arrived in front of Jake's house, a strange feeling overwhelmed me. His home was in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by spacious villas, the beauty of the area untouched by the turmoil that had unfolded inside. The peaceful surroundings contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions raging in my chest. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, the sounds of laughter drifting from within the house, mocking me. It reminded me of the nights Sarah and I had spent talking, laughing before she left. How could anyone be inside, enjoying themselves, while I was left here to endure this painful betrayal? I could no longer wait. I had to face him, to understand the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. The door opened, and there he was, Jake Miller. He stood in a simple t-shirt, his face weary, but still exuding the polished look of someone who had everything under control. But when his eyes locked with mine, I saw panic flash across his face. He wasn't expecting this. "Michael," Jake said, his voice hesitant. "I didn't expect you to come." I didn't want any of his excuses. "Maybe I've waited too long to hear an explanation from you," I said coldly. "Can we talk about Sarah?" Jake hesitated, his eyes darting to the ground before he stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in," he said quietly. I walked in, a sense of discomfort washing over me. This was the house where my wife had betrayed me. The walls around me seemed to echo with the weight of that truth. As Jake led me to the living room, the atmosphere felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. "I know we couldn't avoid this forever," Jake began, his voice almost apologetic. "But I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I couldn't stand seeing Sarah suffer like that." His words barely registered as I interrupted him, my voice thick with emotion. "Then why didn't you stop? Why didn't you make Sarah stop lying to me?" Jake lowered his gaze, his hands clenching into fists. "Because I thought I could change everything. I thought Sarah was the only one who made me feel alive again. I was wrong." The mention of Sarah's name coming from his lips felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving Jake with his hollow apologies that couldn't undo the damage. There was nothing he could say that would fix this. I had to make everything clear. The cost of this betrayal would be steep, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Facing Jake had brought me closer to the truth, but I still couldn't shake the emptiness gnawing at my soul. His apologies were nothing more than temporary comfort for him, a way to ease his own guilt. But it didn't lessen the anger that had taken root inside me. One afternoon, one moment in time, and everything had gone wrong, so wrong, it could never be fixed. Sarah, the woman I had trusted, had now become the one who betrayed me. Every thought that swirled in my mind made it impossible to stop reliving the signs I had once overlooked. The unannounced business trips, the suspicious messages, all of it. It was the answer to the question I had refused to ask for so long. But I still couldn't accept it. I couldn't accept that she had done this to us. I had to make her face the consequences of her actions. I needed to know why she did it, and whether she regretted it. When I returned home, the atmosphere in the house was unnervingly quiet. My two daughters, Olivia and Emma, were playing in the living room, their laughter a temporary reprieve from the pain swirling in my mind. For a moment, it allowed me to forget the turmoil, but I knew it couldn't last. This wasn't something that could be ignored. It was time to get answers. I called Tina, Jake's wife. Part of me wondered if she knew something, if she had been aware of what was going on. Maybe I was just driven by jealousy, but Tina was the only person left who might be able to help me make sense of everything. I dialed her number. She didn't pick up, so I tried again. This time, it rang longer before Tina answered. "Michael, I'm listening." Her voice came, thick with exhaustion as if she was holding back tears. "Tina, I need to know what really happened between Sarah and Jake. Why them? And why didn't you ever tell me?" I couldn't contain the anger and disappointment in my voice, the question bursting out as one painful plea for answers. Tina was silent for a long time, as if struggling with her own emotions. "I knew for a long time," she said finally, her voice strained. "But I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I just let it go, maybe it would end on its own." Her words hit me like a slap. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't realized how deeply my wife had betrayed me. Both Tina and I had known, yet we had stood by, powerless, watching as my family crumbled. "Are you telling me that we both just watched them destroy everything?" I yelled into the phone, the frustration spilling over. Tina sighed heavily, the weight of the situation settling in. "I can't change what's happened, Michael," she said softly. "But I can tell you one thing. Jake has changed. He's not the man you think he is. He regrets it. He truly regrets it." Her words were like a deep wound that cut through my already shattered heart. I didn't know what to think anymore. Sarah, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted to build a family with, had now become the one who betrayed me. And I still couldn't stop wondering, does she regret it? The conversation with Tina left me more confused than ever. But I couldn't sit with that confusion for long. I needed to go to the hospital to see Sarah one last time. I knew she was in critical condition, but it wasn't her health I was concerned about. It was the confrontation that was inevitable. I had to face her. I had to understand why she had done this, and whether any part of her regretted it. I drove to Scripps Mercy Hospital, my heart pounding not out of concern for her, but because of the confrontation I was about to face. I didn't know what I would say, but I was certain of one thing. I needed answers. When I entered the emergency room, the atmosphere was heavy, the dim light from the hospital lamps casting long shadows on the walls. I saw Sarah lying in the bed, her body swathed in white bandages, her face still, her eyes closed. Part of me felt sorrow for her, broken and vulnerable. But another part of me burned with a fierce hatred. Quietly, I walked closer, my eyes fixed on her face. For a brief moment, I remembered the sweet memories of the woman I had loved, but they quickly gave way to the truth of what had transpired. The memories of us, the laughter we shared, the promises of a bright future. Everything I had once cherished now lay in ruins. It had all turned to nothing. My heart was a storm of emotions, but I knew what had to be said. I knew what I had to do. When I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure how the words would come out. But one thing I knew for sure was that I would never forgive her. "Sarah, I know everything. I've seen it all. I know what you've done, and I can't forgive you. You've destroyed everything, this family." I didn't wait for her response. What good would it do? Nothing could change the truth. What had happened would forever remain in the past. And there was no undoing the damage. I had faced the truth, even though it cut through me like a jagged blade. It was unbearable, but I had no choice but to speak it. The words I had prepared in my mind came out. But when they left my mouth, it felt as though I was speaking to a stranger. The woman I had once loved, the one I had shared my life with for 8 years, was now just a shadow, a ghost. The face before me no longer evoked the tenderness I once felt. It held no trace of the woman I had once held dear. Sarah wasn't just asleep. She was in a coma, her body fighting to stay alive after the doctors had done everything they could. But I knew deep down, she wasn't the woman I had loved anymore. She was someone else. I turned away and left the emergency room. My mind was empty, void of thoughts or direction. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this betrayal just fade into the past. I couldn't forgive her. Not because I hated her, but because this betrayal was unforgivable. Returning to everyday life wasn't easy. I forced myself to walk back into our home, where Olivia and Emma played innocently in the living room. The sound of their laughter should have brought me comfort, but instead, it only deepened the void within me. I forced a smile, pretending that everything was okay, but the weight of the situation pressed down on me. My world had shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had built, the family I had nurtured was gone. The illusions I had once clung to had crumbled, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on to some semblance of normality, I knew it would never be the same. This wasn't a dream, and it wasn't a collision that would fade into nothing. Sarah had betrayed me, and whether she was alive or not, I needed to make her understand that actions have consequences. I would never forgive her for what she had done. I began to make a plan. Anger filled my heart, but there was also a cold resolve. The only way to make this end was to make everything clear to Sarah, to show her that no matter what, she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. She had to face the truth, and she had to understand that there would be no running away. One evening, when everything had calmed, I called Tina again. This time, I didn't want an apology. I wanted answers. I wanted a confession. Something I knew she and Jake were both hiding. Something neither of them had dared to admit. "Tina," I said, my voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of anger. "I need to know one thing. How long have Sarah and Jake been involved with each other? Have they known each other for a long time? Or did this just start?" There was a long silence before Tina finally spoke. Her voice was weary. "They started their relationship over a year ago. I tried to convince Sarah to stop, but she wouldn't listen. She wanted to go back to her past with Jake. And he didn't want to let go." The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. Everything I had thought was just a mistake or a slip-up suddenly became a long, twisted story, one that had been brewing for over a year. It was no longer an accident. It was a betrayal that had been planned, a secret that had been nurtured. The world around me shifted, and I realized that I was no longer the person I had once been. "I understand," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "Thanks for telling me, but I won't let this go. Not like this." The next day, I returned to the hospital. Sarah hadn't woken up yet, but I couldn't wait any longer. I had to make her understand. I sought out the attending doctor, desperate for answers about her condition. "Mr. Anderson," the doctor said, his face serious. "Your wife's condition is very critical. We've done everything we can, but she needs time to recover." I didn't answer. It was too late now. Sarah would never know that her betrayal had set in motion a chain of events that couldn't be undone. The battle between us was already lost, and she would never understand the depth of the damage she had caused. Returning home, I continued with my plan. I knew I couldn't let everything that had happened remain a wound that festered forever. This needed to have an end. I couldn't continue to live in this lie, pretending that nothing had changed. I contacted Josh, an old friend of Sarah's, someone she had once loved. I wasn't sure if they still had any kind of relationship, but I needed help. I needed anyone who could assist in the final steps of this plan. Whether it broke my heart or not, I would do whatever it took to make this story end, once and for all. "Josh," I said when he picked up the phone, "Sarah has betrayed me, and I need you to help me clear everything up." He was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. "Michael, I understand what you're feeling, but I can't help you with what you're doing. You should just let it go." His words struck a chord with me, but I couldn't listen. The hatred that had overtaken me was too strong. It had consumed me, and I couldn't escape it. I couldn't stop now. Not when the fire had already been lit inside me. The next step was a video. I didn't want it to be an apology or a plea for sympathy. It was a confession, a public declaration of Sarah's betrayal. I posted it on social media, knowing there was no turning back. This would be the proof she could no longer escape from. When I hit post, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Not because I had won, but because I had finally faced the truth. The truth was out now, and nothing could change what had already happened. As the video spread, I felt a coldness settle in my chest. I had done what I needed to do. There was no more running, no more pretending. The consequences had been set in motion, and now, Sarah would have to face them.